Hi, all. Welcome to this week's Lightning Talk. Today, we're going to talk about how to measure and monitor web performance. Well, why does it matter? Web performance is really about human experience. It's about how people experience the websites, or web applications. And for the vast majority of people, web technology is a key touch point in their life in some way, shape, or form, or in multiple. Due to that fact, performance can both positively or negatively impact how people feel and how they can accomplish tasks. It's really a main interaction for many people. So, just to talk about the impact a bit. So, as I mentioned, this is both can be positive and it can be negative as well. So, 54% of people say that their frustration increases as the load time for a brand's mobile site increases. So again, this is a negative impact when a site is slow to respond or slow to load, and it can also negatively impact the business or the organization as a result of that. 15% higher conversion rates for sites that loaded in 2 seconds or less compared to the average mobile site. So if a site is loading fast, there's a direct business impact. And 2 seconds is very fast. But that's also, this is just demonstrating or illustrating the point about how web performance is important. The faster the site, the more conversions, the better the business can perform relative to the web performance. Pinterest had a 15% rise in search traffic and signups when perceived wait times reduced by 40%. So, that's when you're talking about Pinterest, a huge brand like that's impacting a ton of people within their platform. So, not only the web application itself, but also search traffic was increased. BBC found that they lost an additional 10% of users for every additional second their site took to load. So, there's sites that we've seen that take 12 or 13 seconds to load. So if you think about in relation to that, you can lose. Well, if you use that same calculation, you can lose 100% of your users, which I don't think is exactly relevant for that example. But this just shows that people actually care about performance. It's important to them, and when it comes down to it, it's really about the user experience and how they are experiencing a website or application. 43% of consumers expect a web page to load in 2 seconds or less. I think this is a really important one. To me, this illustrates that there are a lot of larger brands or organizations that websites for, say Amazon or Google or Facebook, they load really, really fast, and they have teams dedicated to ensure performance is something that they look at. But based on that, small business or another organization, that consumer is going to expect the same from that brand. And when that's the reality of the market or the space, it's important that really everyone is optimizing for performance. DoubleClick by Google found 53% of mobile site visits were abandoned if a page took longer than 3 seconds to load. So this is again just illustrating that this is speaking about mobile specifically, but people leave, and that's usually the behavior. Is when a page takes too long to leave, people get frustrated and they'll just bounce off the site. So, given that performance is about people, we need a method to test performance based on the perception of people. So the only way to truly know how the site is performing for the users is actually measure performance and how they're measuring performance from the user's perspective and how they're interacting with it. This type of measurement is commonly referred to as real user monitoring, or RUM for short. And what we're going to do is talk a little bit more about that. So there's certain types of metrics that we look to measure related to user-centric performance metrics. And some of the questions that we want to ask are, is this happening? Did the navigation start successfully? Has the server or the site responded? Is it useful? And has enough content rendered that the user can engage with it? Is it usable? Can users interact with the page, or is it busy? Is it delightful? Are the interactions smooth and natural? Does the site or the application have a feeling that is delightful for the user? And these are the common types of ways to measure user-centric performance. So perceived load speed, that's really how quickly a page can load and render all of its visual elements on the screen. Load responsiveness, and that's how quickly a page can load and execute any required code in order for all the components or elements to respond quickly to the user interaction. Runtime responsiveness, so that's once a page is loaded, how quickly can the page respond to a user interaction, such as clicking a button, selecting a field, entering into a form field. And visual stability, so do elements on the page shift in ways that users don't expect and potentially interfere with their interaction? This is one I see very, very often, and it's a personal frustration for me when I go to click a button and it clicks another one because the elements have shifted within the page. That's really frustrating, and every user, maybe conscious or subconscious, is going to look at things like that as negative, and it'll impact how they perceive the business, organization, brand, or product. Smoothness. Do transitions and animations render at a consistent frame rate and flow in a fluid way from one state to the next? So animations are very popular, whether they're small or large, and there can be a lot or a little bit on sites, and we really want to make sure that things feel right. And there's a lot that impacts that, depending on the connection speed, the user's device, as well as their operating system. And but at the end of the day, we want to optimize for that end user. So metrics to measure, those were the types of metrics, and now just talking about common metrics to measure based on user-centric performance. So first one is first contentful paint, and this is a metric for measuring the perceived load speed. It marks the first point in the page load timeline. So there's really like if you think about a timeline, there's certain aspects that happen, and they happen in a sequence. So marks the first point in the page load timeline where the user can see anything on the screen. So we want to communicate and show that something is happening to our users. And first contentful paint is what allows users to understand something is happening with the site, so they know what to expect. And there's many ways to do that, and that's not really the scope of this talk, but we'll just go into a little bit of the other metrics. And these are set by Google. Google is really the one leading, from my perspective, the majority of what's happening on the web related to performance and technology for web-based applications and websites. So they're the ones that are continuing to lead and make an impact in this space and come up with ways to measure performance amongst many other things. So largest contentful paint. Largest contentful paint is measuring the perceived load speed. It marks the point in the page load timeline when the page's main content has likely loaded. So this is reassuring that content is actually useful and the majority of content is loaded, so I can read or I can see what's going on. And that's when I start to receive value from a a website or a web application is through the content or being able to see something happening on the site and that it's actually useful to me. So if you think about the first contentful paint, that's just showing that something's happening. I can't really absorb or use content at that point, but I do know something's happening. So this is really a sequence of what happens when a page loads in general. First input delay, this is a metric for measuring the responsiveness. It quantifies how the user feels when they try to interact with an unresponsive page. And this is, it ensures that the page is usable. So when you press a button and you have to wait 2 seconds, you don't really know what's happening unless there's a certain indicator. And first input delay helps ensure that, a fast first input delay helps ensure that the page is usable. Time to interactive, this is a metric that measures the time from when the page starts loading to when it's actually visually rendered. So that's everything on the site has rendered, and this is the point where the page is actually usable. So time to interactive is, if I'm seeing the load page, the first contentful paint and the largest contentful paint and this first input delay, the next stage is me being able to interact with that page, and this is measuring the time that it takes to get to time to interactive. The total blocking time is how long a page is not interactive. So when the scripts load and the code is loading on a page, the page is not interactive at all. And if we've reduced the blocking time, because certain scripts block how the page is made useful or usable, and if we decrease that time, it helps ensure that the page is usable in a quick time. So, talking about ways to measure these metrics and monitor them as well. So there's two different types. There's lab and field. Lab is before production or before you release something or local testing. Because you're not able to do this in a production environment where there's actual users, they classify this as lab. And then field is real user monitoring. It's based on how the actual user experiences the performance. There's a list of a couple here. For field, PageSpeed Insights is a great one, Chrome UX Report, Search Console, and Firebase Performance Monitoring. Those are all tools by Google that helps you to measure. And in the lab, there's Lighthouse and Chrome DevTools. There's majority of audits are done with Lighthouse, but Chrome DevTools is another way that you can measure some of these aspects.